Welcome to the DL. This is the show where we talk about everything in the truck and equipment repair industry. It's my job to help inform and educate you on ways to help your business. We talk with technicians, business owners, associations, industry experts, manufacturers, and even a few you wouldn't think traditionally apply to your business. Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of the DL. I am your host, Tyler Robertson, and today we're going to talk more about resources that are out there for your company and people that are out there trying to help your company grow. And in our state in South Carolina, we're going to talk about specifically, but every state kind of has these resources available to them. I think it's important to know as a business owner or a manager or an executive what resources are out there. So with that said, I'd like to welcome Ted Pitts, the CEO and president of the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
So let's just give a little background here. What exactly is a Chamber of Commerce? And there's local levels, there's town ones, there's state ones, there's a U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
What is the State Chamber of Commerce? What's the role of that organization?
Yeah, so the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce is really an advocacy organization that advocates for business interests on the state and federal level. We also connect members across the state, companies across the state. We're the voice of business, the champion of business. So on the state level, we're focused on making sure that the entire state and the ecosystems across the state are working, whether it's workforce development or the tax code or infrastructure. We work on those big things. You know, our partners are local chambers, and each local chamber is autonomous, has its own board of directors, and is a community-based entity and, you know, does great things for their communities.
Well, let's talk about South Carolina a little bit, because we really kind of have like three regions, right? Yeah. We got our coastal area, Myrtle Beach, Charleston, the touristy area, the ports. We got some big businesses down there. We have the upstate area where we got BMW that came in years ago, and we got that technology corridor thing going on up there now. And then we got our Midlands area with the state capitol and healthcare and the universities. And we have manufacturing here as well. You know, why South Carolina? Like, why do businesses come to South Carolina? Because I got to ask, why don't you ask that question first? I'll kind of give you a follow-up.
Yeah, you know, so when you look at the state, you know, you can't start talking about South Carolina and the business ecosystem without talking about the port down in Charleston. Mm. So that port is really a regional port, serves larger than just South Carolina, but it really is kind of that umbilical cord to the rest of the world with goods coming in and out. So the Port of Charleston and logistics is something that's key, and companies look at South Carolina too. The quality of life. I mean, you look at the quality of life here and CEOs and others that want to live in a place like South Carolina. And then really it's our workforce and the talent that's here. You know, South Carolina's work ethic, you know, we're the least unionized state in the country. You know, our employees want to have a direct relationship with their supervisors and the owners of their companies and directly communicate with them. And they're willing to work hard and roll their sleeves up. So, you know, there's a lot of great things going for the state. And we're small. We punch well above our weight, but that also, I think, is a benefit.
So, you know, people might not realize there's some big manufacturers in South Carolina. Can you kind of rattle off some of the bigger ones that people may know of?
Yeah, so when you think of a North American headquarters, right, Michelin would be the first. It came here. BMW quickly followed. But, you know, obviously we've got Boeing's kind of East Coast production, the lead down in Charleston. You know, now we've been known as the tire capital of the world with Bridgestone, Conti. I mentioned Michelin. You've got GT, Trelleborg. When you look at automotive, you got BMW, Volvo, and Mercedes that all have OEMs here in the state. So there's a lot of marquee brands. But, you know, you look at places like Sunoco, which make paper goods. They're the largest homegrown Fortune 500 company that has global operations, but they're headquartered right here in Hartsville, South Carolina.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that are outside South Carolina how many big companies are here and how much manufacturing goes on here and everything that's happening. So I'm at dinner last night with two guys. They're out of town. They're with another company. And one of them's from California, one of them's from Utah. And he just straight up asked me, like, well, how's the business climate here? How is South Carolina a good place for businesses to go? And I wasn't quite sure how to answer that. So how should I have answered that question?
Yeah, so we are good in some ways, right? We're good in the logistics. We're good on workforce. You know, we're good, least unionized state. You know, there's some places that we need to do better on. Our tax code for business is not the most competitive. So, you know, when you look at the state, we're really business friendly. Our regulations are really business friendly. strike a good balance. But there are a couple things that we need to work on. Infrastructure was something our General Assembly stepped up to the plate and provided additional revenue for our roads and bridges, which are a key component to industry and moving products around. And then, but our tax code, we think we need to work on our tax code to make it more competitive. The Independent Tax Foundation ranks us in the 30s. I think it's 36. So there's some things we can improve on, but we have policymakers that get it, that they understand that business and jobs drive an economy and are important to the state. So they're constantly working on things like that.
So I'm just going to go on my little rant about tax codes here just for a second. So I was over in Lexington County, the building before this, and we outgrew it, right? And we needed more. And I told my agent, I go, George, like I need a place. This one's 20,000. I need to double up, and I need something kind of close. I don't want to move that far away, and I need something ready to go because we're already bursting at the seams. I can't take the time to build. And he came back. He goes, well, there's two, right? There's one here in the town of Lexington city limits. And then there's one here where we're at currently today over here in, Richland County. So, he goes, but there's a problem with the city of Lexington, and that's they want a tax revenue on every dollar sold, right? Yeah. So we go in there and we meet with them, and they punch the calculator, and they're like, oh, you'd have to pay us, $40,000 a year. I'm like, well, that's last year's revenue. We doubled. So now we're talking double that number, and I plan to keep growing. And I looked at him and I go, well, what do we get for that? And he's like, oh, well, you get police protection, fire protection, and we got a lot of nice restaurants around here. And I'm like, I hear what you're saying, but $100,000 a year, that's a hard pill for a business to swallow. And the tax goes a little bit different over here. We still do pay a business tax, which, we want to pay our fair share, but what do we get for it? So, it's unfortunate there's other smaller areas like that kind of, I don't mind paying. Just what do I get? And it's hard to explain that to people, I think, a lot of times.
So you're talking about the business license tax, and it's one of the most business unfriendly things we do here in South Carolina. And it's each municipality does it differently. Some counties, 8 counties levy one. It's something that the Chamber's been working on for about 6 years, and we're hopeful that in September, when the Senate returns, they'll pass a comprehensive reform package. Not only are the tax rates high, but local governments have started outsourcing it. So they've hired a private sector company and said, hey, private sector company, go find anybody that you think owes us taxes, and we'll give you half of the take. They're not only hitting you for guys like you that walk into town hall and say, what do I owe you? But they're also out there, trying to find businesses and get money out of them that may or may not be due. And businesses want to pay their share. And unfortunately, when you look at that, that's a double whammy on top of our property tax code, which hits businesses at 3 times the rate that a lot of other states hit them.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the tax code. It's complicated. I'm a small business. I'm trying to grow fast, and we sell some of our product through Amazon. So we ship to Amazon, then Amazon ships it to whatever warehouse in the country they think it needs to be at, right? Their algorithms. So 2 years ago, we had a letter from the state of California, and it says, hey, because you had product at Amazon at one of the warehouses in California, you now owe us sales tax for everything sold in the state. And by the way, you may owe us income tax as well for all the profit you generated in the state of California. I'm like, this is just getting insane out there trying to deal with all these tax codes. And I hear it's at the local level. I really hope eventually they figure out something better at a federal or national level, because it's really confusing and hard for businesses to deal with.
Yeah, the state's tax code is some places simpler than other states' tax codes, but we have layers of taxes. So you've got the county taxes, you've got the municipal taxes, your school district taxes are in those county taxes, and then you got state and federal taxes. So there's a reason we're, I think, 36th on this study that ranks states based on their tax code for business, and we've got to do some work on that front.
Yeah, so the one thing I took notice when I was going through the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce website is there's been a lot of great things you guys have done, but they're not like snap your fingers and they're done in 2 months, right? These are things that just take a long time to actually make the change happen once there's a problem. Why is that? Why does it take so long?
Well, and I'm a recovering politician, so I serve in the General Assembly, so I can say that. Politicians think in 2-year increments. Yeah. The Chamber thinks in 10-year increments, right? So we're looking out over the next 10 years, what things do we need to improve to make South Carolina a better place for business? Because if it's a better place for business, it's a better place for South Carolinians with jobs, high-paying jobs like you're adding here. So when you look at things like infrastructure, it took 10 years for the General Assembly to get to infrastructure. When you look at tax code, it'll take 10 years to get our tax code improved. North Carolina did it about 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago now. They overhauled their tax code. We're hopeful that our state policymakers will do that as well. And it takes leadership. So, we need partners in the General Assembly that get business interests. So any of your viewers, listeners, that have relationships with members of the General Assembly, you need to talk about things like tax reform. You need to talk about things like liability reform, which is really a big issue right now coming into COVID or coming off of COVID. Frivolous lawsuits. Are employees or customers going to say, I can't prove I got it at work or in your establishment, but you didn't do these things, so I'm going to sue you and say I probably did.
Yeah, I just saw some articles now coming out, people suing their employers or suing a place like I wasn't safe there, I got COVID there. It's going to be really interesting to see how that all plays out, and hopefully it doesn't destroy a lot of businesses and insurance premiums and those types of things. So, and let's get back to you for a second. So now you're doing this whole South Carolina Chamber of Commerce. You mentioned you were on the General Assembly, but you also worked for Nikki Haley there for a while, who was the governor of South Carolina.
Yeah, so I worked for Nikki for her first term. We both are from Lexington County. Or she originally, obviously, from Bamberg, but we served in the House in Lexington County. And when she got elected, I went to work for her for the first term and then moved over here to the state chamber.
Yeah, so you're chief of staff with her for a while, right?
Yeah, so I started as deputy chief of staff and then became her chief of staff, yes.
Yeah, that'd be some exciting times working up in the higher...
She's a great leader, was a great boss, and, obviously had a great vision for South Carolina. And, was an honor to get to work with her, and the state was lucky to have her as our governor.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about COVID a little bit now. You can't have these conversations without talking about COVID. Yeah. I mean, South Carolina was kind of one of the last states to kind of close, and we kind of closed, kind of didn't. And, I was more than camp, like, we just got to figure out how to work as a business and society while we have a health problem going on. So I thought we did a great job not shutting things down and essentially keeping people, closed. And then we kind of got out early the gate right away as well. Cases spiked, but now we're sitting here, we're recording this in mid-August. Cases are down way below where they were months ago.
Yeah, so I think Government Master did a great job leading us through this. There are a lot of states, and I talked to my friends in Ohio and Pennsylvania and other places where they just shut everybody down. And, the governor here slowly ratcheted things down and then slowly has ratcheted things back up to allow the economy to start moving. And I think financially, businesses here in South Carolina will be in a better place for it. But ultimately, we can't fully return back to an economy until people feel safe and comfortable that, people are social distancing like we are, or people are, wearing masks and doing those sort of things. And the governor's promoted that, and we've promoted that as well with our Wear It campaign.
Yeah, so we do weekly COVID testing for every single employee here at Diesel Laptop. So I had mine yesterday, and so did everybody here. So it's great to know you walk in, we're trying to social distance, we're wearing masks when appropriate, we know if we were positive or not, we're able to take those people out. And it's great to see, I saw the University of South Carolina has their rapid saliva test now they're going to be doing for all their students on campus and faculty. So it's great to see people outside just the government trying to do things to make it a safe place for their employees and their customers. Yeah,
so businesses, and we'll talk a little bit about liability reform, but businesses, nobody wants their customers or their employees to be safer than businesses and operators do. Yep. And, when we look at trying to get liability reform, both North Carolina and Georgia have passed it, COVID-related protections. We have not yet here in South Carolina. Our General Assembly, it's something they need to do for businesses. But any protections wouldn't go to anybody that's not doing the things to keep their employees and customers safe. So those bad actors should get no protections. But if you're a company, let's go back to May when the federal government was telling you not to wear a mask.
Yep.
and now they're telling you when you're out in public, you should wear a mask. So it's hard to keep up to date with the changes, and obviously health experts have changed on their thoughts. But we need for companies that follow guidelines at the time to have some limited targeted protection against being sued.
So I think for me as a business owner, what you just talked about is how the things keep changing so quickly has been the most frustrating thing for us. Like you said, it was, even at the federal level, don't wear a mask, now wear a mask, and different organizations said different things. And then, oh, no, never mind, doesn't get spread by touching things as much. It's mainly by air droplets in the air, and things keep changing all the time. And I get it. We didn't know a lot back then. We do know a lot now. And like I was telling you off the air, we were, I was in panic mode in March when all of a sudden in April, when sales dropped up 30, 35%, you always think as a business owner, like, oh, sales will never go to zero overnight. But all of a sudden you're looking at it like, man, they might go to zero overnight. And how do we succeed as a business? So did you see that from other businesses that are involved in the chamber and some of their concerns?
Yeah, so when you hear businesses, a lot of them, depending on what industry they're in, there were a lot of essential industry that kept operating, and not fully, but at some level. But there were some businesses that, sent everybody home and said, we're going to have to wait and figure this out. And, obviously demand is the biggest concern that our members have, is the demand for my goods or services. Yeah. Will it fully return? And if it doesn't, some of the furloughs I may have done may end up be permanent layoffs. And, we look at kind of the federal package, the stimulus package they're working on now. Unemployment benefits, where are they going to be? But we need to find a way to get the economy back on track. And a lot of that's based on finding a vaccine.
Yeah. So, I mean, we took the stance when COVID happened, right? We said, okay, we're not going to add any new employees to certain departments. Certain departments were like, okay, it's engineering, sales, tech support. We need more people in those departments. Let's keep hiring. So we were able to actually hire an additional 25 people during that whole thing. And what we found out was, there was a lot of good people looking for jobs because some of their companies, they did furlough them, or they did lay them off, or did do cutbacks. And we're like, man, if there's a time ever for us to go grow our bench, this is the time we need to go do it.
Right. And, when you look at in-person meetings and opportunities to gather in person, obviously the piece of our economy, the tourism piece, has been affected. But folks like Diesel Laptops and other manufacturers have really seen this as an opportunity and when to find and pick up talent. So we're hopeful that we come out of this in the near future, and that our tourism and hospitality industry can get back on its feet, who have been hit the hardest. And we got to get our schools back in session, and we've got to do that safely. So that's really kind of the first step in a lot of pieces of this.
Yeah, it's unfortunate this thing's around, but it's here. It's not going away. We're all wanting a vaccine. We're all wishing for a vaccine. I think we get one sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, I think everyone just needs to figure out how to walk that line between having a business and having an economy and a paycheck and being safe. And it both can be done. Yeah. It's just doing things a little bit differently. Do you look at it now, or some of your businesses that you guys work with, saying, hey, we may never go back to doing things a certain way, and we're changing this because this is a better way? Has there been some silver linings that you've seen through this whole thing?
Yeah, so I think a lot of folks have found out to become more efficient. And I think there probably was some waste in the system, processes that is going to get taken out. It was interesting, whenever people went to work from home, people said, we can do this. But now I'm hearing from our members, like, we need to be back in the office, because that collaboration and communication, that in-person, being able to read somebody's body language, like, that's important. So I think you'll see a lot of those office-type jobs that people said, these jobs can be work-from-home jobs. I think you're seeing people say, I want both. I want to have more flexibility to work from home if I need to, but I want a place to go and a team to work on. So it'll be interesting to see how we come out of this.
Yeah. So even inside Diesel Laptops, we have some departments that they actually do better working from home. Yeah. I don't know if they were chatting too much at work or too social or whatever it was, but they're at home and they're like, I'm like, wow, I don't know if I ever need to bring them back. Right. And other departments are like, this isn't working so well. We got to get these employees back. And same thing with us too. All of a sudden we're like, man, do we really need to go to 45 trade shows a year? Yeah. Do we really need to spend a couple $100,000 a month on Google for advertising and Facebook? And we look at it, we're like, well, we're not doing those things and we're having record sales months. Maybe we shouldn't have been doing those things. Yeah. So I totally agree. I think a lot of companies are coming out of this stronger and a new appreciation and a new view on everything that's going back on. So going back to the Chamber of Commerce, just if people are listening to this, whether they're in South Carolina or another state, what reasons would you give them to say, hey, you should go talk to your local state Chamber of Commerce and get a relationship going? Yes, why would they do that?
So when you look at state chambers, and I'm a member of the Council of State Chambers, it's a group of the state chamber leaders from across the country. Chambers are the most effective advocates for business interests in your state. And we're fully funded by the private sector, so we're not a government entity, which means sometimes we're that entity that has to tell government, no, you have this wrong and you need to fix it. And then that's difficult. But without a state chamber, a voice to to make that argument, you really don't have an opportunity to make change. I encourage folks, if you have the resources, be involved with your community, your local chamber. If you have an industry specific association, you ought to support that. But you ought to, support the state chamber, because at the end of the day, there's really only one organization that's looking out for the entire state, the entire business ecosystem, and looking at it in the long term, not in the short term. And that's your state chamber of commerce. So, folks need to get involved. It's a way you can connect with other business leaders from around the state, other companies, but it's a way you can almost give back to kind of the future of the state and the business climate.
Yeah, and that's what I've really realized now, is us as a business kind of growing up. Like, we're always complaining about this thing or that thing. You see people on Facebook complaining. That really doesn't go anywhere. It's actually getting involved with your state agencies. And like I was just talking to Kim Mann from the Richland County Economic Development, and getting involved with those people to say, hey, here's our problems. We need some resources, and we need to go. This is important to not only us, but to the next generation, to other business owners as well.
Yeah, and we all know that a rising tide lifts all boats. Yep. So somebody might say, yeah, infrastructure, for example, on the state level, it really doesn't affect my business. But the reality is if you want tire plants to come to South Carolina, they've got to be able to move their goods and services around. With tire plants becomes thousands of jobs, come contracts for small businesses in that community. Yep. So it really is a rising tide lifts all boats. And the state chamber is the entity in your state that's working to rise and make that tide rise.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, Ted, if someone wants to get a hold of you or a hold of the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce, what's the best way for them to do that?
So I would go to our website, scchamber.net. So scchamber.net. If you go there, you can get my contact information or the organization's contact information, and we're happy to talk to you. And we appreciate people like Diesel Laptops who are employing South Carolina and South Carolinians and giving back to their community. So thank you.
Yeah, no, hey, you know what? I'm excited to be part of the chamber, right? I mean, I was in my garage and dining room table 5 years ago, and for us to be at this point, 150 plus employees, hiring more people, I see the path ahead of us. And, we want to be involved and help the community grow as well, because like exactly what you said, as we've grown up, we have contractors that we use that have grown their business. And it's really an effect that kind of keeps spilling over to each other. As you said, the tide kind of rises everybody as we go.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Very much. Thank you, Ted. So there you go, guys. Just know that there are resources out there. There are companies out there. You have your state chambers. You got your local chambers. You have economic development resources out there. It's important to be involved. It's important to have a voice. And I will say this too, Ted didn't mention it, but vote, right? We got an election coming up. No matter what side you're on, get out there and vote. Make sure your voice is heard. That's what everyone kind of gave up and fought for a lot of years ago. It's an important thing to do for everybody. So with that said, it's not just diagnostics. It's diagnostics done right. And thank you for watching this episode.